Alrighty guys, this thing absolutely freaking rips. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're jumping back onto Big Red. So first thing we're going to do is fix up that front wheel bearing that we broke on the first test drive. And I've got a brand new steering rack for this thing, so we can actually make this thing steer properly. So let's jump into it. Okay, so we've got that hub off there. As you can see, it is actually worn inside. So what we're gonna have to do is run a bead of weld, probably 2 passes inside just to turn it down so that bearing will be a nice tight fit inside. Now to get this on the lathe, because my lathe is so small, we have to cut these studs down. They are too long anyway. But as you can see, to get them in here and reach on there, they just won't reach because the studs are in the way. Okay, so I've stripped everything off here and you can see the steering that we made a couple of videos ago. Now it does work okay, but it's really not well out on the test ride. What I found is it's just too snappy with it and it actually binds up and gets locked on. So the body actually rubbed on the wheel a little bit and it locked on and I couldn't steer back and it stalled and it was all just a big mess. So I've picked up this go-kart steering rack. This is for buggies or whatever. They're actually pretty common. So what I'm gonna do is make my own clamps to clamp to the steel body because there's nowhere to mount this thing. And then hopefully we can somehow mount it up under there like that. So with our shaft coming up, and then we'll just be able to shorten our tie rod ends as well that came with the kit, and everything's come here. So that's pretty good. And then we'll have our little universal joint here coming up to our original steering wheel that we've got there. Okay, so as you can see there, we've got the rack in place. Now it is over to one side more, over this side, because of that center beam in the center there. I've had to actually sit the whole thing over, but being that we're using U-joints instead of that solid shaft, we should be able to correct it with our steering column. So as you can see here, as the kit allows, is a just a bolt-on steering flange. So I'm actually going to try and cut off this section here, bring it up further and bring this steering wheel up to a more comfortable position, because before it was sort of like driving a tractor. So we'll have to lengthen that and then we can shorten our tie rod ends and hopefully they'll work. So we've still got a fair bit of ground clearance there. Now the massive issue I had was the U-joints being way too big to fit in between the two sections of tubing there. So it's actually pretty damn tight when you turn it. So that was the big issue I was having, but I think I've gotten away with it. So yeah, let's lengthen up this shaft and then we can do our tie rod ends. So before we can lengthen that steering shaft, we actually have to mount up where the steering wheel is going to go so we can work out how much length we need to add. So I picked up this 3/4 inch coupler. Now I grabbed this because it is nice and thick and it does have hexagon sides, so we can mount this up quite easily. Now this won't actually fit in there because this is 20 mil, so we're going to have to bore it out on the lathe. Now being this such a small lathe, I also have to adjust everything and we're going to have to use the main carriage screw. Now definitely don't recommend this, I'm just going to do it because that's all I've got. But yeah, either way this wouldn't work, so we'll just see how this goes and hopefully we can mount this up. Alrighty guys, so I've got everything done for this steering wheel. So as you saw, I machined up this collet for the center. That's actually going to hold our steering shaft inside. And I've also machined a circlip groove so this thing can't fall in and out, and put a grease fitting in the center just to make sure this thing spins nice and freely. Now I've turned down this end because I'm actually putting on a quick release steering wheel. I've really wanted one of these, just being that it's so confined in there trying to get in and out. We'll be able to just quickly pop the steering wheel off and jump in and out of this thing easily. So that's going to be welded on there like that. Then our quick release will go down, drop into that, like so, like that, and then our steering wheel can now bolt to that. So let's jump to that. Alrighty guys, so got the steering wheel on there, turns really good. I ended up having to make a new mount because the steering knuckle here actually hit the mount that I made, so anyway, I had to do all that, so that's fine, and we can still move our wheel and get in and out easily. Alright, so that's on there. Now what I want to do is double check my steering rod end mounts, just because I'm going to have to make up some new arms for these, so I wanted to make sure these are all in the right position. So what I've done is gotten a rope from the center of our spindle and ran it all the way to the center of the rear axle down there. Now it is a bit hard with that sprocket in the way, I should have done this before, but I'm trying to achieve the proper steering acronym. I have never had that on this thing, and I think that's why it's been so difficult to steer. So that front hub is all right. As you can see, I've got it sort of set up in the center there. And then I'll show you this side. This is the side I was having a lot of issue with, and it does make sense now. So see how our bolt hole here isn't actually going through our string line? That's what we need. Alrighty guys, so we've got fully working front steering again. So the rack and pinion upgrade is now in, and it's much better than before. Now, as you can see, our rack does sit over this way a bit more, so I've had to shorten that tie rod up a fair bit. So we'll see how this thing goes out on the track first. And I do have to make up some better mounts and sort of stiffen them up. But yeah, I want to see how this thing drives first when we test drive it. Now the next thing I want to do is actually jump onto that keyway on the back and actually machine them properly. So if you guys missed out on the last video, I've actually made up this keyway cutter for the lathe, so I'll link that above. So yeah, all we're doing is cutting some slots for those taper locks on the back so we can actually drive this thing properly. Alright, so I just made up this little tool here really quick, so it actually levels the shaft. So the other day when I machined up that keyway, I only did a small amount. And because I've used a lathe in between, I didn't know where the perfect center was of the shaft, so I've made up this so we can replicate it. So now whenever we move this shaft in the holder, we just bring it back to zero, and it's all set nice and square to the lathe and to the workpiece. Alrighty guys, this thing absolutely freaking rips. It is unreal to drive. Now I'm pushing it back because the dodgy accelerator cable I've got here stuck on, and it took me right before the bushes, so I had to quickly put the clutch in and try and find the ignition. Jesus, it was scary. There was smoke coming out everywhere, but man, this thing is so much fun to ride. The only thing I'm thinking of is actually extending the wheelbase, because it is so tight to try and steer with my knees in the way, and maybe put in a reduction gearbox. Geez, that thing scared me, as you can probably tell. I'm struggling to breathe. Anyway, I think this thing is really turning out well. A really good first test ride, to be honest, and I'm really stoked with how this thing goes. It's got so much power. When you actually back off on this sort of dirt, it flicks the back end out, and it's super sketchy to ride. We don't have rear brakes either. I did bleed them up, but for some reason they stopped working. Alrighty guys, I'm super stoked with how that first test ride went. Let me know what you guys reckon down below. I'm absolutely stoked with how this thing goes. It's got plenty of power, and the gearing is spot on. I barely got into fourth gear there. But yeah guys, I'm gonna have to end this one here. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys smash that subscribe button, notification bell so you don't miss anything. I'll see you guys in the next one.